It is always my pleasure to be here. And this evening we are here with Brian Nagle of Real Time. And Brian is going to be here talking to us about the things to know how to open a staffing agency. It's one of those questions, and it's one of those areas of business development that has so many moving parts. Brian comes with us with 45 years, is it, in the trenches, Brian?
Yes, 45 years of industry experience, correct.
Don't hesitate in saying that. That should be something to be so proud of. So 45 years for Brian in the industry, been servicing and serving those business owners. Brian, we welcome you here today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Just a small correction. I've been in industry for 45 years. The first half of that was effectively in airline management and finance. The last half has been helping staffing agency owners.
Well, and this is why it's always the last thing is going to be the best thing, right? And that is
Yes.
why you're here with us today, and why you're going to talk with us and go through some of those areas that we should know about as it relates to, opening that staffing agency. But before we get started, I have to tell you, Brian touched my heart earlier on today, and he gave me this quote. And I don't know if you got it from somewhere else, Brian, or this is your quote, but I'm going to quote it anyway.
I'll take credit for it.
So Brian is going to take credit for the quote. And he said to me that how he loves doing what he does. He doesn't consider what he does work. And why is it that with all the years of experience that he has, that he can now pass that on to other people? And his statement was, I don't have to experience the pain to learn the lesson, quote unquote. And I just thought that was just such a remarkable and touching statement. And Brian, as he says, he's taken full credit for that statement. Thank you so much, Brian. All right, Brian, tell us about Real Time. Tell us about Brian. Let's open up with that first of all.
Okay, so again, I started my professional career in 1982 in finance, and I was with American Airlines in a subsidiary for the better part of 20 years. The last 20 plus years, I've been servicing staffing agencies, and since I came to Real Time, more specifically nurse staffing agencies. And my focus is helping people get started correctly, put in best practices, and avoid the landmines that are inherent to most first and second year businesses.
Right.
Again, if you don't have to experience the pain, but you can still learn the lesson, you can continue having your business in gear, and it's not 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards.
Right.
So
right.
Real Time has been in the nurse staffing game for almost 30 years. We do a lot with startups, but we have a couple of rather large clients. One's been with us for 7 years, and from startup, they're going to do $750 million this year.
Wow.
So, as we're talking to our clients, we always want to key on best practices. And those are things that we can share with startups that, again, help them avoid landmines. Yvette, you'd be surprised at the number of agencies that don't do site visits.
Right.
That don't go out to their facilities.
They just send the person, right?
What's that now?
They just send the nurse, or they just send
and
the
there's no
personnel.
follow-up with the facility. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
And I can give you 4 benefits of doing regular site visits, and that's an amazing best practice. You go do a site visit, you're connecting and building relationships with administrators and DONs. You are finding out how your employees are doing in that facility and getting feedback on the people that are excelling, the people that are doing what's expected, and the people that aren't quite measuring up.
Right.
Not only that, you're there. You're going to ask, what are your staffing needs while I'm here? Okay, so it's a way to get job orders So they don't have to call the agency. They're getting it while you're there. And then lastly, you're making sure they receive the invoice when it's scheduled to in their system to be paid. So now you're managing your receivables. All
Right.
those are key elements to being successful as a new staffing agency. But the number of people that don't do site visits, it's really almost alarming.
and
So,
and and I can so hear the passion that you have about, embracing some of these best practices, and implementing some of those best practices, because again, it's one thing being able to get that contract, right? But the hardest part is maintaining that contract, right?
and then not only that, but credit these days is as important as getting the contract.
Right.
Now, here's an ism. I didn't come up with it. Our credit department did. But a sale is only a sale when it's been collected.
Right.
So people have got to know they've got to keep their eye on the ball and they've got to follow the money trail. And
Absolutely.
and if invoices go out 90, 120, 150, 180 days, they're not going to be in business long.
And this is really where you guys come in. And again, look, we can rattle on all day long, right, Brian? I mean, we had to like shut ourselves off before we came onto the broadcast today, and we can rattle on all day long and talking about the nuances and talking about the pitfalls and talking about the positive side, but also really trying to establish for new owners their path in getting into that staffing world. It most definitely has an element and a relative relationship with home care. And you started going off the tracks just a little bit. So with that being said, Mr.
Uh,
Passionate Brian, we
okay, so when somebody's passionate about home care, they care about individuals. They're in it because they want to help their customers, they want to help their patients. Okay. Well, to get started with this, people got to realize it's not a part time business. At the very least, it's a second full time business. And then they've got to be as passionate for facility staffing as they are for home care. You've got to treat your clients with respect. You got to treat your clinicians with respect. And those are the two areas. If you can get those down from the start of the business, boy, you got the rest of it licked. I mean, that's the
right.
reason people come to us because they're outsourcing everything. And if they can focus on the business development and the recruiting of clinicians, but how do you keep the clinicians you recruit? You got to show them you care.
So one of the questions that I did have is, explain the funding aspect. But with that being said, I know that's also going to be explained in the PowerPoint that you have available to us. So maybe we should like tap into that and
Okay.
and go through that and identify some of those key points that you want to relay to our listeners today. Again, focusing on the things to know as you're opening up a staffing agency, and also similarly, how a company such as Real Time can help you get to that point. So Brian, I'm going to lead it over to you to talk through your PowerPoint.
Okay. So let me go through this. Some of the slides I'm going to go through really quick because there's a couple that I want to focus on. Okay.
Sure.
So thank you for joining us. My background, 45 years in industry, aviation, and now staffing support. Um, Real Time has a PEO component. PEO stands for Professional Employer Organization, otherwise known as employee leasing. Why do you go to a PEO? So that you can focus on the things you do best and outsource all the rest. So you don't want to learn administration while you're building a business. If you can outsource that to professionals, you're going to gain a lot of momentum because you're putting it in the hands of professionals. So you're the on site manager. We have a co employer of record. Your name is on the workers' comp certificate. Your name is on the application. So, at a base, part of our PEO services, and has to be, is we perform payroll processing for our PEO clients. And we handle ACA compliance, family leave, Americans for Disability Act, all those things that you have to know about. COVID changes, PPP keeps changing. So, payroll challenges, classifications of workers. IRS says that people that work for a facility staffing agency and are working scheduled shifts should be W-2s, not 1099s. If somebody's a 1099, they should be a registered business as an LLC, and then it becomes a corp to corp rather than a payroll transfer. Um, there are a number of other items. We don't have the time tonight, but I'd be happy to talk to anybody offline on additional payroll challenges. Um, and we'll just skip to human resources. So we help with employee handbooks and the rules and regulations that PEOs are required to help their clients with. So we've got a great HR team. Workers' compensation. We provide workers' compensation at market rates to startups. That's very unusual. We don't have any additional premiums. All you're paying for is the premium per hour of your clinicians. RealSure is our bundled service. So, payroll funding is what we do. We do 100% advance. There are several sources of capital you could go with. You could get money from friends and family. You could go get a bank loan. You can go factoring, which means you're paying the payroll, then you're selling your invoices. What we do is we mitigate all that for our clients by we're the ones advancing the money to cover payroll and taxes on every hour worked. So you don't need to have upfront money to be able to get into this.
And that's one of the key areas, if I can just jump in there, Brian, that I
Sure.
really want to preface on is the funding aspect, because again, there are different terms, like you mentioned, factoring, funding, and but there is a slight difference. So can you just repeat that again,
Sure.
Brian, in terms of what
So
the difference is?
Factoring is typically an 80 to 90% advance rate against the invoice. So they're holding 10 to 20% until that invoice is paid. We're advancing all the money to cover payroll and taxes, and we send out the invoice for our clients. Again, we're trying to take all that administrative stuff away from them.
Which
The
is
only
part
thing
of
we
that
ask our
PEO
clients,
aspect.
yeah, and the only thing we ask our clients to do is input the payroll. But here's the limitations. If you go with friends and family, you got to pay them back. You run into trouble. You know, it's you don't want to necessarily risk family relationships. You go get a bank loan. Your payroll
Interest.
is limited to the amount of money you get from the bank.
Right.
Where I've got a woman down here in Florida, 11 months with us now. She went from startup to billing over 100,000 a week. If she had gone to get a bank loan when she was
Couldn't have
first
done that.
starting, 10 or 15 grand max, and then she would have run out of money to cover payroll. So we can help her scale from 5 million to 15 million. And obviously, if we're servicing a $750 million client, we have a pretty big, significant line of credit to service our clients. Doesn't mean we're indiscriminate. We evaluate every single facility for their
Right.
credit worthiness and making sure that they pay as close to terms as absolutely possible.
Right. And again, I'm
Um,
going back to that PEO relationship and just again making sure that the very clear understanding of what that is. You are putting yourself into the place of the agency, the staffing agency.
well, although the employees are all managed by the agency, they are not managed by us. We're a
Correct.
co-employer of
Correct.
record.
Correct. And we're just
Okay.
talking about the back end areas, whether it be the funding, payroll, like you said, submitting that,
and the
doing
workers'
workers'
comp.
comp.
You
Exactly.
know, since they're part of our PEO, we can provide that workers' comp.
Right.
And that workers' comp, as we know, is very difficult to get when you're a startup staffing agency and you don't have direct control of the employees.
Right. So you also, let's say that I come to you, Brian, and say, you know what, Brian, I need you to work with me as a PEO because I have a facility I've got a contract with. This is the name of the company. You do your due diligence in making sure that that facility is creditworthy, because ultimately you are advancing all monies to my employees, right, on our
Well,
behalf.
well, we're actually, yeah, so that's correct. We're putting the money in their direct deposit accounts on Friday.
Correct.
Okay. And then we're invoicing your facilities. So we
Correct.
have to make sure that they're credit worthy because
Exactly.
obviously, as large as our line of credit is, we don't want to run out.
Right.
So, and we need to make sure that we're going to be able to collect those monies.
Right. And I
So,
have three brothers that would not fund me and give me that money. So companies such as Real Time is a good route to go. They're doing their due diligence. They stand behind their worthiness as well, so that the agency owner doesn't have to worry about that and
and,
can focus on building that business.
and not only that, Yvette, when you're going to a facility and they question, well, you're a startup, how do we know that you're going to be able to cover payroll? Well, we work through Real Time. So we have unlimited payroll capability.
Right, right.
And we've been doing this for almost 3 decades.
And there's some facilities that don't even care. They just want that person, that body, right? They
Right.
really don't care, because ultimately it's not their responsibility to pay the employee. It's their responsibility to pay you as the employer. So again, doing your due diligence. All right. So let's go back to your PowerPoint, because we're digressing here. And I knew this was going to
Okay.
happen with you, Brian.
So the workers' comp, no annual fee, no annual audit, and there's no deposit. Um, Credit and accounts receivable. So our credit team and we're adding 2 new people every month to the credit team. That's how quickly our clients are scaling. And then HR management and client relations, and then software, payroll software that was written specifically for nurse staffing. Okay. So that's our focus. And you get essentially a single vendor for all these services. So it just makes your time on the phone a lot faster. And when you call in, every one of our employees knows nurse staffing inside and out. So we're not a general, we could be a general funder, but the majority of our clients are nurse staffing. So,
Perfect.
um,
Perfect.
and we have amazing client retention on the PEO side. So we're doing something right there. Okay.
Wonderful.
Uh,
Wonderful.
and then, all right. And then saving you valuable capital. And we've been around since 1994. And the owner of our company he ran a nurse staffing agency out in California before starting Real Time. And when he had difficulty getting a loan from the bank that was sufficient for his needs.
Right, right, right. Gotcha. Thank you so much for that, Brian. But I do have some other questions that I want just to throw at you that we can just like ad lib here. In your professional opinion, and obviously, you've been doing this a long time. Can you speak to us about what are some of those key components that should be considered when we're starting up, or an individual is thinking about starting up a staffing agency? Can you respond to that?
Absolutely. One, you got to realize, even though the demand is insatiable, and we're at the most critical, that we're 1 million nurses short across the country. So, but there's heavy competition. So you've got to be prepared to service your clients and your clinicians. You can't take anybody for granted. And you got to realize that this is absolutely a full time job. And truthfully, it's 24/7. So the key components are, what's your commitment to your business? And are you going to try to learn best practices, or are you going to figure out that, you've got it down from day one? It's really important that there are lessons to be learned. And as we tell every client, we're going to give you best practices from our most successful clients. Whether or not you choose to listen to them is up to you. But I'll tell you, the ones that do typically are the ones that are scaling very rapidly.
Right,
Um,
right. And
so
that goes back to your earlier quote. They don't have to experience the pain to learn the lesson.
no, but they gotta be committed to their own success. I mean,
Right.
truth is, we had 12 people sign up last year that never wound up billing an hour because they thought it was like winning lotto. Not that they
Mm.
had to go out and sell to facilities and they had to gain contracts and all that. So um, it's
You still got
important
to
to
put the work
realize
in. You got to put the
you,
work
you
in.
have to work it. And so and we advise against cold calling, by the way.
Okay.
Okay. The reason being, if the front desk is telling you they don't use agencies, but you know that there's a shortage, right, of um, nurses in that facility, they're getting people from some agency. But people at the front desk are continuously trained to say they don't need agencies. Well, one of the tactics that's a best practice is when you're interviewing clinicians, find out the facilities they worked at that they really loved and get them to create the introduction to the administrator and the DON for you.
Absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
the best jobs are always gotten from networking.
And
How
and
how
the
is that
word of
how is that
mouth.
lesson missed?
Right,
Okay,
right.
it,
All right,
it
now you're
just
getting excited, Brian.
it's simple stuff, Yvette, but it again, it's a best practice. We also suggest that people stay away from vendor management services. Those are third party companies that are hired by the medical facilities to handle the supplemental staffing. They
Mm,
get 5 to 6% of gross invoice just for allowing you to staff the facility. And normally there's 75 to 90 days before you get paid.
right. Again, some very key points, again, that needs to be at the forefront of your mind when entering into these types of arrangements or even contemplating starting a staffing agency. There are some very, very good key points there, Brian. Thank you. So here's my next question. So in my little time on the circuit, not as long as you, Brian, but on my time in the circuit, I most definitely see staffing having peaks and valleys. I remember when I first came into the country, it was so peaking that it even got to the point that we was, bringing people over from different countries because of the need for staffing. So while it has its peaks and valleys, what do you see as the norm in a new staffing agency? How do we build up that momentum first of all, and how do we prepare ourselves for some of those valleys that may occur along the way?
Oh, Yvette, what a great question. That thing is as loaded as a baked potato. Um, um, but no, you're right. Even this year, at the beginning of the year, facilities were paying COVID rates. Now, many of them are backing off from COVID rates and they're going back to their agencies and saying, we can't afford your bill rates. We got to lower them. So,
Right.
how do you insulate yourself against the valley? Site visits, going out there and being that one vendor that facility is going to always pay on a regular basis because you're paying more attention to that facility than any of the other agencies servicing them.
That it might be
And
worth not having the change of reducing the rates or changing and eliminating the
well,
COVID
and
rates.
even if they're going to reduce it, you
You still
negotiate
got
it.
hours.
So, right, so that you can weather the storm together. You're compromising, they're compromising, but in exchange, you're asking for payment terms on 30 days, not 60 or 90.
Right.
So you're getting something in return for giving up something. Okay. Or you're asking for additional shifts. Geez, you're cutting down my bill rates. I need to bill more hours
Right.
to keep my agency going the way that it was.
And
So
that same statement, Brian, I was speaking to one of our ladies a couple of weeks ago, and we were drawing up a proposal for a facility, and that same situation came up, and we had actually come up and said, all right, then, well, in reducing rates, how I'm going to negotiate is by saying I would like to have guaranteed hours. So again, it's a
it's
one
a give and
wins.
take.
It's a give and take.
Absolutely.
It's a
Um,
give and take.
but and then you have to have confidence that you're delivering a message. And that's the toughest thing I think of that is getting people to feel confident as a business owner, because it's a drastic change going from an employee to an owner. And
Right.
look at the lives that you become responsible for.
Yep.
So it's certainly an uptick in responsibility. And we tell our clients we're available by cell phone 24/7. We want to be able to answer their questions on the spot. Um, we're in this to help them succeed, but they've got to want to succeed as well and not give up the ship.
Absolutely. Brian, again, you are just oozing with, passion about what you do. And again, just referencing what we said prior to coming onto the broadcast, is that when you love what you do, it's not like you're going to work. And you most definitely magnify that statement. Because I know you want to talk a little bit longer, right, Brian? Be honest.
I well, the
Raise your
truth is I
hand.
could talk for 3 hours, so okay, but we won't go there. So.
Right. But what we will do, though, Brian, is that we'd most definitely want to have you come back on again. Let's get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty. For all of you who are not aware, we do have a home care conference coming up in June 28th in Florence, South Carolina. And Brian is going to be there presenting as one of our guest speakers also. And aside from just doing that presentation, you're going to be there for the day. You could be able to tap into Brian and his knowledge, his experience, and the seasoned aspect of what he's done over the last 25 plus years. So that's going to be awesome for anybody who really wants to sit down and really scrutinize how is the best to put myself in a position to open up my staffing agency. Brian.
And you just made a great point. Putting yourself in the best position to succeed. And
Absolutely.
if you can outservice your facility, outservice, so you're providing a higher level of service to your facilities than your competitors every single day. The
Right.
Japanese have a great term called Kaizen.
Kaizen.
Never ending daily improvement to get better with everything you do. Look at it this way: a 1% change on a daily basis, 100 days, you got 100% change.
Absolutely. Brian, with that, I was going to ask you to leave us with your final statement and your final remarks and your final thoughts for those who are entering into opening a staffing agency, becoming that entrepreneur, becoming that business owner in this very rapid and volatile world. Your statements are just so very on point. But I am going to ask the question, what's going to be your closing remarks for everybody that is listening today?
Oh boy!
Oh my God! Don't tell me you ain't got nothing to say
No.
now.
I can boil it down to one. Okay.
Yes.
If not you, who? And if not now, when?
Wow. Awesome. Well,
Okay.
you've got some shout outs coming out here. We've just got Lakia out there in Mississippi and Virginia who has just say, "Hey, Brian." So she wanted just to say, it's good to see you. She was there. So again, she's just reinforcing all the things that you're saying today. and applying it to her relationship with real time and in her engaging in a staffing agency platform. Brian, it's been my absolute pleasure, my love. Stay on the broadcast. Don't go away. But we are going to close out for this evening. I thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I certainly appreciate it. And all the best to everybody that's starting an agency.
You are an angel. Thank you so much, Brian. Good night
My
to
pleasure.
everybody. And we're going to be seeing you again soon. Stay focused and stay visual on your Facebook to see when our next event is. But aside from that, have yourselves a great, great evening.